All right, folks. So I'm going to today, I just wanted to drop a quick little video about two items. So here I'm on the assignment page. So for the short analysis essay, the first one we're doing, so hopefully you're working on that now. So I have three things to address today. One of them I've been addressing a lot, and I've been addressing a lot in my comments to you guys. So the message isn't getting through, and I really want it to get through for a couple of reasons. One is, regardless of which class you're taking, whether it's my class or physics or chemistry, when you move to university, when you're in Eastern Florida, whatever you're doing, you must incorporate support into your arguments, whether it's a post, such as the last one, the one I'm grading right now, or the previous ones, and I've mentioned it a few times, but like some of your ideas are really, really clever, and I like what you're putting in, but you have to have the support from the text. And for each point you're making, you need to incorporate support that backs up what you're saying. So if you're writing, if you're talking about the themes and the things they carried, or the symbols, this is one that seems to be very often looked over. So, for example, symbols and the things they carried, and you use the feathered hatchet that the grandfather gives to Kiowa and the Bible. It's like this mix of cultures, but you want to bring in what O'Brien says in the text, how he writes it, and then discuss, like look for a couple of different places where it's used, and then combine those and talk about how that is something that is symbolic and what it's symbolic of, or potentially symbolic of. But bring in the language from O'Brien's text. And so that's with a post here. In your paper, for sure that needs to happen, and we'll talk about the elements in a thesis here in a second. But what I want you to understand is the transfer of this skill set. So if you're writing a paper in psychology, in sociology, in chemistry, in physics, in engineering classes, whatever paper you're writing, you must bring in the support. And that habit gets started when you back up anything you're writing in a post about something, whether it's literary or, again, engineering. You must bring in the evidence. So I can't emphasize enough. So as we're moving through this course over the next several weeks, I want to give you points. I want to give you full credit. I would love to give you full credit, but I can't give full credit unless you have support from your texts in it. And support, not just a quote here and a quote there. It needs to be an integral part of what you're writing. So you need to show that you understand the text, not just what's being said, but bringing in how the writer is saying it. And the next thing we move in after this is poetry. So still in the poetry section, you need to have the quotes. Okay, I'm done with that. Next. The paper is, as I'm looking at this, so it talks about the skills you need to develop and all this. But I want to look at step 2 when you're making the claim. You need to determine which literary element or elements you will write about. I just want to talk briefly, so for just a couple of minutes here, about what those elements might look like. So what are some literary elements that you might use? Well, in your assignments, we've dealt with theme and setting and symbols. We've dealt with tone. So those are absolutely literary elements. But what are some others? The organization, the usage of imagery, the usage of figurative language, the usage of dialogue, the usage of dialect, the usage of literary elements, the way in which the writer establishes their place in history, the things that I don't know if you see my dog, he's kind of cruising in right there. But those are different types of literary elements that you can address. You're welcome to choose, so for example, if you choose everyday use or sweat or a rose for Emily, whichever story you choose, think about a literary element that you understand and one that you can have plenty to talk about, because a one-page paper in this is probably not going to be successful. You're going to need, like I mentioned before, I would say somewhere between easily, 750 to 1,000 words for something like this. So, 3 pages. Could you do it in less than that? Maybe. But you need to do it effectively. So it can't just be, here's an example of symbolism, and here's the symbol, and here's what it means. Like, it needs to be more than just identifying. I need to know how that symbol permeates that work. Like, how is the writer utilizing it? So, for example, here we have Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper, and I talked about this a bit in the other video. Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper used symbolism to help present the protagonist's despair and conditions to the audience. All right, how they use a symbol for something of that nature, how they use imagery, how they use physical versus, for O'Brien, like physical, tangible versus intangible items and weights that he brings up, and the things they carried to show the, how he utilizes tangible and intangible weight to show the burden that soldiers face in the Vietnam War. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. But then you need to develop that whole concept, right? So please choose a literary element that you understand, that you see, that you get, and that you can bring in support for. The last thing I want to talk about is your thesis statement. So your thesis statement, I would prefer that your thesis statement is not a list, but for example, here up in the top of this, craft a clear thesis that does not begin with "in this essay" or something similar. So it should not begin with that. It should just be framing out what your paper is about and how you're going to address it, but not "in this paper I'm writing," or I'm going to tell you about, like, none of that. That's way too in your face. Much more subtle, much more academic. That is not to say in other genres of writing that they might not accept that. That's possible. So you have to understand that. But in this particular one, I want to make sure that you understand that this should not be this "in this essay I'm going to write about" should not be what you do. Anyhow, if you have questions about your thesis, if you have questions about your, and there's the part of the dog, if you have questions about your thesis, literary elements, or even the support aspect of this, don't hesitate to let me know. I'll be happy to help you. But please, please, please make sure that you're bringing in the text. I have to see that to make your comments, to make your posts, to make your paper valid. You need that for credibility. All right, well, I hope this helped a little bit. And again, if you need help, please don't hesitate, reach out. And thank you so much.